This video is for solving quadratics, the square roots method. So we're going to solve quadratics using square roots, and this method only works when there is no x term. So you can see here they need to be in the form ax squared plus c. So your steps is to isolate x squared. So I want to move where x squared is on one side of the equal, and then the 49 is on the other. So what I'm going to do, I'm actually going to add the 49 to both sides, and that way I'm dealing with a positive. And so there's a reason for that. So I would get x squared equals 49. And then what we want to do is we want to get rid of this exponent 2. And so to get rid of an exponent, if you do the opposite, you would square root. And you have to do it to both sides because remember with equations, whatever you do to one side, you have to do to the other. So what happens is the square root cancels the exponent of 2. So now I have x, and then the square root of 49. So if you do the square root of 49 on your calculator, so square root of 49, it's going to give you an answer of 7. But remember with square roots, negative 7 times negative 7 gives me 49, and then positive 7 times 7 gives me 49. So your answer is x equals a positive or negative 7. So please make sure to remember that when you're doing square roots now. Okay, so down here, the same thing. We're going to add 16 to both sides. And so now we have x squared equals 16. So we square root both sides. So the square root cancels the exponent. And the square root of 16 is a positive negative 4. Same thing on this one. We would add 100 to both sides. And so we would have x squared equals 100. Because remember, a negative 100 and a positive 100, those cancel. And so then we square root both sides. The square root cancels the exponent. And then the square root of 100 is a positive negative 10. All right, so this time I've got x squared plus 25. So now I have to subtract 25 from both sides. And so I have x squared equals a negative 25. And so what happens here is you cannot square root a negative number. It's a non-real answer. And so what happens here is you get x equals 0 because you cannot, this doesn't work. Okay, so now we have 3x squared. Let me skipped around here. Okay, there we are. 3x squared minus 108. So I'm going to add 108 to both sides. So that would leave me with 3x squared equals 108. But I want x squared. So now I have to divide both sides by 3 so that this will cancel. And then 108 divided by 3 gives me a 36. Now I can square root both sides, and I get x equals a positive negative 6. So you want x squared by itself. It cannot have a coefficient on it. So here I would have 5x squared equals 45. If I divide both sides by 5, I have x squared equals 9. Then we square root both sides, and I'm left with x equals a positive negative 3. All right, so now we've got a half. So first we're going to add 3 to both sides. So then I would have 1/2 x squared equals 29 plus 3 gives me a 32. Now to get rid of a half, you do the opposite. And so I know it doesn't seem like it, but you can multiply by 2. And 2 times a half gives you a 1. And so now you'll be left with x squared equals 64. And then we square root both sides, and x equals a positive negative 8. All right, so this time we would have 9x squared equals 16. And then we've got to divide by 9. And so I would have x squared equals 16 over 9. We square root both sides, And so one thing neat about when you square root a fraction, this is the same as the square root of 16 divided by the square root of 9, if that helps you. And so you would have x equals a positive negative. So the square root of 16 is a 4. The square root of 9 is a 3. All right, so here I would have 4x squared equals 25. Same thing, we've got to divide both sides by 4. So I would have x squared equals 25 divided by 4. Square root both sides. And so again, this is the same as the square root of 25 over the square root of 4. So I'm left with positive negative. The square root of 25 is 5. The square root of 4 is 2. So a positive negative 5/2. All right, in this one, we would have, so now we got to do minus 16. So 8 minus 16 is going to give us a negative 8. And so right off the bat, you'll get to the point where you can recognize that you can't square root a negative. So for this one, I'm just going to go ahead and jump down to x equals 0. Now, sometimes you get some really wonky ones. So if I square root both sides, if you square root 19, you are going to get a long, crazy decimal. So we're going to round to 2 decimal places. So for this one, x is going to equal a positive negative 4.36. So they're not always going to come out nice and pretty for you. So here I would have x squared equals 41. So we square root both sides. X equals, and so the square root of 41, same thing. You get a long, crazy decimal, but round to 2 decimal places. So a positive negative 6.40. All right, so here I'm going to subtract 5 from both sides. So I would have x squared equals 12. If we square root both sides, x equals positive negative, so the square root of 12 gives me something crazy. Positive negative 3.46. All right, so now we've got a bunch of craziness. So 2x squared equals 126. I'm going to divide both sides by 2. So I'm going to get x squared equals 63. Square root both sides. And x is going to equal a positive negative 7.94. This one, I'm going to divide both sides by 36. So I would have x squared equals the square root of 100 over 36. And then you square root both sides. Sorry, guys. So these cancel again. This is the same as the square root of 100 over the square root of 36. So x is going to equal positive negative. Oh, that does not look right. Hang on really quick. Okay, so you get 10 over 6. When you do this, this is going to give you 10 over 6, but you need to simplify, and you can divide the top and the bottom. So it's going to simplify down to 5/3. All right, so for this one, negative 8x squared equals negative 24. And then we're going to divide both sides by a negative 8. So I would have x squared equals a positive 3. Square root both sides. So x is going to equal positive, negative. This one comes out to about 1.73. All right, so down here we've got a third x squared, and that's going to equal 12. A third, to get rid of that, you can multiply by 3. So x squared equals 36, square root. So x equals a positive negative 6. And then for this one, 4/5 x squared equals 8. So 4/5, this one you would multiply by 5/4. You always flip your fraction. When you're trying to get rid of a fraction, you always flip it on its head. And so 8 times 5/4 is going to give me a 10. So I would have x squared equals 10. We square root both sides. So x equals positive negative 3.16. All right. This one you've got some breaking down to do. So what we're going to do first is we're going to get rid of this 3/4. So we're going to multiply both sides by 4/3. So remember, to get rid of a fraction, you flip it on its head. So 6 times 4/3 is going to give me an 8. So now I'm just left with x squared minus 17 equals 8. Then I can add the 17 to both sides, and I would get x squared equals 25. And then square both sides, and x is going to equal a positive negative 5. So that's it for this video.